So my Cutlass is pretty quick. And it achieved all of my goals for, let's call it phase one. 4.8 turbo 400 single turbo, runs high 10s, low 11s on pump gas. Drive it to it from the drag strip. It's fun. And now it's time to go a little faster. So, like a lot of people's personal projects, this one has been in the works for several years as I accumulate parts and, kind of as funds allow. It's been my goal to do a Powerglide on this car, to add a transbrake, and kind of wanted to keep the Turbo 400. I built that with the full manual valve body, and I'm going to put that in a different project. That's the reason I'm not just going straight for the transbrake in the Turbo 400. Also, this car has always been a little bit about weight savings, so we're going to eventually swap to an aluminum block, and in this case, the Powerglide also is going to save some weight. So this is a core Powerglide from a 69 Camaro. I traded some work for a gentleman for this, and it was from a sub 100,000 mile car with very little wear. The inside, this was a good core to start with. So we're getting set up here on the Bridgeport, and I'm going to be cutting off the factory GM Bellhousing portion of the Powerglide case. I kind of fell into an SFI Bellhousing for a really good deal. A guy transitioned from LS to Coyote, and he was selling off all his Powerglide stuff that didn't fit, the GM product line. So I got a SFI Bellhousing for what I think is a great deal. Came with a flex plate and a few other things. So this is something I've wanted to do. I've seen people do this with wheel widening or narrowing, where they'll set up a wood saw blade in an arbor and then use that to cut aluminum. And aside from being a little scary from a safety perspective, this worked really well. Definitely have to respect it, stay back from it. In my mind, it's no more dangerous than using a table saw without a guard. Again, not the safest thing, but with care and caution, I think it worked out okay. If anything, I think I would have maybe set up a barrier just to keep your body a little farther away, because I think if I could have used a bigger blade, I could have done this in less setups. This is very much overkill for removing a bell housing. You can definitely do it with a jigsaw or any number of handheld saws and get similar results. But I wanted to try this, like I say, just to see how the technique worked. And it did take, I think it took like 6 or 7 setups. I didn't have enough travel from the head relative to the blade, so you had to keep clocking the thing around, and I ended up having to move the turret out on the Bridgeport, and it made a hell of a mess with chips everywhere. But aside from that, it worked fantastic. And I am definitely, being as safe as possible. So there is that. Here I have to keep an eye on contact points, and so I'm just manually moving it until I get as close as I can. There was a little corner, and I pull out the reciprocating saw and just nip the corner off here. So we've got pump housing, main case, SFI bell housing, tail housing, flex plate, all of the stock parts. Input shaft doesn't get reused. There's output shaft housing, which is going to go away. Dipstick gets reused. Some of it gets reused, some of it doesn't. Servo apply piston does not. It's kind of a mixed bag. The governor's going away. We've got new pump gears for the pump. We've got 6AN fittings for the housing for my hydraulic lines going up to the transcooler. And then on this table, got the new hardened gear filter, adapter that goes with the new torque converter. Here's the servo, applied piston and cover, new pump gears, rollerized output, transbrake, gasket set. This should be the high gear frictions and steels, turbo 400 style input, and deep pan with spacer. So that should be everything we need to put together a pretty decent unit. So yeah, we'll blow out the housing and start putting the thing back together. So I'm running the Jegs brand billet transbrake, and the instructions for that are very old. I'm not sure who makes that for Jegs, but the instructions weren't so great. And what I've noticed is that the factory stamping to retain the piston return springs is so flimsy that it potato chipped, and I built a compressor. And what I'm using here are 2 C-clamps with bars and a 2-point compressor. So I'm compressing that retainer plate in 4 places because the return springs for the transbrake, they're about 3 times the force, roughly calculated, from the GM return springs. More number of turns and a thicker wire diameter. They're, trying to release that return piston or that low reverse piston as quickly as possible. And I'm not shooting for reaction times or bracket racing, so in my mind maybe it's overkill for my application, but this is my first Powerglide, so there is that. I'm trying not to deviate too far from the instructions on this one. Ultimately I got it, lesson learned, and now over set up on the table you can see the 2 points of the puller pushing down on that retainer. As I get set up here on the work surface, you can see in the bottom right on the workbench, there's the potato chipped, the GM retainer. Yeah, that was a struggle. But I popped a hole in the table just to make it easy so I can pass the output shaft through the table. Ultimately, I probably should have made a carrier to put on the engine stand, but this was, pretty low risk. So it did help me get the thing set up and assembled a little bit easier with it stable on the bench. So here we've got the input shaft and direct drum going in, and now the front pump assembly. Really pretty nice to work on it without the bellhousing in the way. And here's the bellhousing. Amazing how much thicker the wall sections are on that unit compared to the factory casting. But it's intended to take, multiples of the original power. Factory tail housing going back on. And at this point, we're going to flip it over and start putting in the valve body. So this is, I think I mentioned, this is the Jegs billet transbrake valve body. And some time has passed. This wasn't all done in one day. I think you'll notice my shirt changed colors a few times through this. I had to order parts on at least one. And then, so this work is spread out over several evenings. I had to order the shifter shaft, and a couple other things that I was missing. The deep pan going on. I'm just putting a couple bolts in it for now as I'm still waiting on the filter. For some reason my gasket kit came with what looks like a turbo 400 filter, and I have no idea why. So one of the things I'm pretty excited about is the Pro Bandit shifter. I picked this up similarly off Marketplace, a Mustang guy that didn't need it anymore. Really nice unit. It's already gated for the Powerglide. Comes with the switch, the thumb switch for the transbrake, and it came with all the brackets and the cable. And I got it for, I think, less than half of new pricing. So that that's going to work out really well. I had a gated pistol grip style shifter in the Cutlass at one time, and it was the Hurst brand, and I didn't care for how sensitive it was. I think I was too excited and pushed on it too hard. But I'm going to try and be ginger with this one because I really like the shift action on it. And I went through all of the two of the gears and park, reverse, and neutral, and made sure that everything lined up well. So we had to take a little bit of a step back because I could not put the torque converter into the trans. It was angry. So start methodically checking stuff. Input shaft goes in fine, and ended up splitting the pump apart. And that's what happens. We bind up that far in on the bushing. So I'm gonna start measuring and see if the bushing is undersized for some reason, or if the converter came in oblonged or something. So we'll set the camera up and we'll take a look. So I broke out the mics on this one, and the converter snout was measuring from memory like 1.8745. So, you know, nominally 1 7/8 minus a little bit. I polished it ever so slightly just in case it had any sharp edges on it, but it seemed fine. The bushing, I was struggling because the only mics I have are groove mics, and to measure accurately on a pair of snap gauges or telescoping gauges is a little tricky, but it was showing something, something a little on the tight side. So I ended up spinning the pump in the lathe and just polishing the bushing. It's not my proudest moment, but this is a limited use thing, and I think it's going to be okay for now. So after a couple rounds of back and forth and checking fitment and just trying to sneak up on it, I got it to a slip fit, and I think it's going to be okay. Still plenty of material on the bearing. It will be all right. Upside, it's easy enough to take back apart. I'm not concerned. It's better a little loose than before when it was so tight you couldn't turn it by hand. So we are trending in the right direction. Now we just redo the installation again, getting everything cleaned out and pop it all back together. It was definitely a lot easier to assemble when it was in the vertical position, but all told, it still went back together fine. And I did end up ordering new bolts. I needed an odd size fastener for that, 2 3/4, I believe, to get enough thread engagement. But here you can see the converter turning freely. This is what it should have been from the beginning. Here we are. Last item that I can do for now is putting a new seal on the dipstick, and until the last couple parts come in, we're golden. Well, that's a wrap with the exception of the pan filter and, tail shaft seal. And this come out really, really good. The cut with the Bridgeport. So this is good. Kind of making this a two-parter. The next time we will work on putting this in the Cutlass, swapping the yoke over on the trans mount, lines, fill, set depth on the torque converter, and hopefully the swap is a pretty quick swap. So That's it for today. See you guys next time.